Hello, everyone. I'm Tommy Lee Hayes Brown with Rideau Recognition. I have the honor of presenting to you my buddy, Chester Elton. He's an amazing person you're going to really enjoy today. He's going to talk about how the best managers create a culture of belief and drive big results. Concepts taken from his latest book, All In with Adrian Gostick. Chester is is the father of four amazing children, author of 11 books, 5 of them New York Times bestsellers. 1.5 million copies of his book have been sold around the world. They've been translated into 30 languages. And he is listed as one of the top 30 global gurus in the leadership space. I just really want to extend a thank you to Chester for joining us today and being a great part of our Rideau family. Just a couple housekeeping items. Make sure that your phone is on mute. Make sure that if you want to ask a question, and I please encourage you to get your question answered by one of the most premier experts in our business, Chester, go ahead and just press the button that says ask a question. And go ahead and type your question. I'll get those questions, and towards the end of the broadcast, we'll chat with Chester and get his feedback on your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my friend Chester Elton.
Great. Hey, thanks for that wonderful introduction, Tommy Lee. I'm a big fan of yours as well. Tommy's got 4 amazing kids, although, you know, when you have 4 kids, there's always one that's maybe not as amazing as you'd want them to be.
Absolutely.
And I'm delighted to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is organizational culture. As Tommy Lee had mentioned earlier, it's really been an honor to be nominated as a global guru in both leadership and organizational culture. For about the last 20 years, Adrian Gostick, who's one of my dearest friends and my co-author, we've been studying organizational culture. Now, our journey didn't start there. You know, we started with reward and recognition. Wrote a wonderful book called The Carrot Principle, based on a very simple premise. Somebody does something great, you know, you notice it, you recognize them, you give them the metaphorical carrot. So Tommy Lee, to kick things off and keep you engaged here, if the carrot is the symbol of recognition, what would the opposite of the carrot be, Tommy Lee?
If the carrot is the symbol of recognition, what would the opposite? And I don't know the answer to this question. You're about to find out that I honestly don't know.
Well, you always see it's the carrot versus the
turnip. I'm trying to think of something that grows down in the ground that you pull up.
You're stuck on tubers here, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the carrot versus the stick, right?
The stick, okay.
That you're going to get more with you know.
Oh, right.
As my grandma used to say, yeah, you're gonna attract more flies with honey than with vinegar, right?
Absolutely.
So the idea is that you create a positive workplace by recognizing all the wonderful things that people do everywhere, and you give them a carrot. Well, we got some great data from that. This was based on a global survey we did with over 200,000 engagement surveys. It was conducted by Willis Towers Watson. And we saw some great results. People were more engaged, they stayed longer, customer service scores were higher, and so on. What was interesting, though, is as we took a deeper dive, we realized if you didn't get the culture right, the recognition didn't matter. And I want to say that again. If you don't get the culture right, the recognition doesn't matter. It's got to be, the culture and the recognition has to reflect really what your core values are. So we put together an amazing study with the help of Willis Towers Watson, over 300,000 engagement surveys. And we developed a roadmap. We call it the All-In roadmap. Now, we're not going to go through all the steps. In fact, for this particular webinar, we're going to focus on the core, which is how do you engage, enable, and energize your employees. It was based on really an amazing, not only research by Willis Towers Watson, case studies, leaders that we talked to, interviews that we did. One of the really interesting cultures that we studied was the Hard Rock Cafe. And we got to work with the folks at the original Hard Rock in London, England. And, you know, the Hard Rock is a restaurant that I know most of you have attended. And I'm sure a lot of you had fun going to the Hard Rock Cafe. So Tommy Lee, I want to bring you back in here. If I were to ask you, what is the core of the Hard Rock Cafe? Why do people go to the Hard Rock Cafe? You would say they go for the
Experience. That's where my parents took me my graduation day from college. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
where in the DC location. Yeah, I wanted to go for the experience. I wanted to see the memorabilia on the wall. It wasn't for the food.
Yeah. And how is the food?
The food's delicious. It was great.
Yeah. And,
It was
and
great,
it's
but
okay.
what I remembered was everything but the food, though.
Exactly. And I'll tell you what's really interesting is the Hard Rock Cafe really changed the restaurant experience. Normally you go to a restaurant because there's food that you like. Now, the Hard Rock Cafe food is fine. You know, and one would say better than average. The pulled pork sandwiches, the milkshakes are great. We go for the experience. And what's really interesting is that the core of the Hard Rock culture is this. They believe there's a little bit of rock star in everybody. And I love that because I think when you look at your customers as rock stars, as opposed to just hungry, it changes the whole experience. You go there to be a rock star. Your waiters and waitresses are rock stars. They've got fun piercings and tattoos. They're crazy with you. The music is loud. People dance on the tables, right? And everything is okay because you're a rock star. You can do a lot of things at the Hard Rock Cafe that you can't do at other restaurants simply because of that philosophy and that culture of being a rock star. Well, we thought long and hard about the subtitle of the book, How the Best Managers Create a Culture of Belief that Drives Big Results. And I love this definition of an all-in culture, a small group or organization or division where people believe what they do matters and they make a difference. They can connect the dots between what they do and how they make a difference, not just for the customers, for their coworkers, for the communities, and so on. Well, we kicked the story off with a really interesting character named the Great Blondin. Now, I doubt many of you have ever heard of the Great Blondin. The Great Blondin's real name is Jean-Francois Gravelay, and he grew up in the circus tents of Europe, became very famous in Europe, and wanted to bring his talent to the United States. And he tried to think of a way he could kick off the tour that would garner a lot of publicity, that would get him, out there so people would want to come to see his shows. So he came up with this idea that he would be the first acrobat to string a 1,700-foot wire across Niagara Falls and cross the falls. No safety net, no safety cord, no nothing. And it was a phenomenal success. He got in all the newspapers, he got in all the publications, and people flocked to see his shows. Well, because it was so successful, every time he came to the United States, he would kick off his tour at Niagara Falls. Now, he understood in entertainment what we understand in business. And that is, you just can't come back and do the same trick over and over again, right? And so he would continue to reinvent his performance. He would raise the bar, right? So one time he came and he went across on a bicycle, one time on stilts, another time it was blindfolded. Most often, though, he would show up with this little wheelbarrow and he would do various stunts. My favorite was he stopped in the middle of the falls and he pulled this little kerosene stove out of his wheelbarrow and he cooked an omelet, because he's French, right? And he lowered it to the Maid of the Mist and the crowd just went crazy. Well, legend has it in June 30th, 1859, the Great Blondin shows up to Niagara Falls with 25,000 people show up to see him. Now, in 1859 in upstate New York, 25,000 people, it's pretty much everybody, okay? And he starts working the crowd and he calls out and he says, "Who believes I can cross the falls?" And they all cheered, "We believe." And then he said, "Well, who believes I can cross the falls with my little wheelbarrow?" And again, they all cheered. And then he asked a really interesting question. He said, "Well, if you all believe, which one of you will get in the wheelbarrow and cross the falls with me?" And as you might guess, a hush fell over the crowd, right? No one volunteered until at the very back, a guy waved his silk top hat and said, "I'll get in." Well, it wasn't just anybody. It was his manager and his best friend, Harry Colcord. And the Great Blondin stopped him and he said, "Harry, I appreciate you volunteering. I wanted to prove a point, and the point is this. It's easy to say you believe. It's harder to get in the wheelbarrow." And I love that concept. It's easy to say you believe. It's harder to get in the wheelbarrow. Well, as a tribute to Harry, the next time they went up to Niagara Falls, he actually put him on his back and took him across the falls, which was no mean feat because they were basically at the same size. So in this short time we've got with you on our webinar, I want you to ask yourself two questions. First off, are you all in, right? And then, is your team all in? Because if you can't get yes to the first question, you're not going to get yes to the second, right? As leaders, the way you conduct yourself, the words you use, where you spend your time gives your team permission to do exactly the same. So, thoughts on the great Blondin, Tommy Lee? What do you think? Would you have gotten into the wheelbarrow with the great Blondin?
Absolutely not. Yeah. I wouldn't have. Too much at stake.
Yeah, I think the only thing he ever said to us, when he put Harry Colquitt on his back, was, "Don't look down."
Don't look down.
Don't look down.
Now,
Good.
if you ask me, I might consider it, but you're kind of crazy, so I'm not sure.
Well, and it's
in
just
a good way. Crazy good.
There you go. It's a sign of commitment, right? Well,
absolutely.
Again, research. One of the things that Adrian and I love to do is not only do we love to talk to people and look at the case studies and talk to leaders and practitioners, we like to look at the data. This was the largest study ever conducted by Willis Towers Watson. It was conducted in 2009, 2010, the heart of the recession. And it begs the question, how large was the study? So Tommy Lee, your skill testing question, was it a 2-year study of 300,000 people, a 20-year study of 30,000 people, a 200-year study of only 20 people, or we simply watched a half-an-hour episode of
I'm going with A because you said 2009 to 10 or 8 to something like that. It was a 2-year span.
There you go. You're right. 300,000 people.
Yeah.
By the way, a massive database to look at, plus or minus 0.05%.
Wow.
In accuracy. So you can feel really good about that. And one of the things we did, and I want to keep you on the line here, Tommy Lee, because we looked at a lot of brands, those brands where people have an emotional connection. So I'm going to throw up a couple of logos here. And I think, just think about what is your visceral reaction, right? To Apple or to Disney or to Amazon. So which one of those is your favorite?
Depends on the day, but I'm so invested in all three, actually. I would say, the one I absolutely can't live without would probably be Apple.
There you go. Yeah. And you've been to an Apple store, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
How many people work at an Apple store? What would be your guess?
I don't know. It's so busy and everybody's moving around. I don't know, 30
They just keep coming out of the back, don't they? I mean,
yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah. Do you know the Apple store in New York, they call it the Cube? It's open 24/7, 365 days a year. They have 3 shifts. In that one store, they have almost 900 employees.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that ridiculous? And they're not, not only are they there, they know what they're talking about. They're passionate about the products. Disney, people save up for years to take their family to go see Disney.
Absolutely.
And Amazon Prime, how did we live without Amazon, right, Tommy Lee?
Well, because Amazon is very, very dear to my heart. I have a connection with them professionally, and then Disney, of course. I have kids. Great memories, great pictures. So like all 3 are juggernauts in my life, and all 3, I get a warm feeling with all 3.
Exactly, and my point is when you have your logo, whatever company it is, like put your logo there. What do you want the reaction of people to be? Do you want to have that emotional connection? Do you want to have those great memories associated with it, right? And not just how do your customers react to your logo? How do the people that work with and for you, your employees, are they proud to tell people where they live and work? I think that's really key. See, leadership is also a brand, as you well know, Tommy Lee, right? And your brand and your culture are inextricably connected. I love this quote from then CEO of Quicken Loans, Bill Emerson. If you don't create a culture will create itself. It just may not be the one you want, right? So think about, what do you represent when you walk in the room? What's the emotional connection that people have to you as a leader? Are you trusted? Are you inclusive? Are you open to new suggestions and innovation and so on? So that was one of the questions we asked. How do you get people to buy in to these best-in-class cultures? Well, again, back to engage, enable, and energize. How do you engage your people? Willing to give discretionary effort. Have you enabled your people? Or some people would say empowered, right? Do they have the tools? Do they have the training? Do they have the experience that allows them to deliver on your cultural promise? And then energize, probably my favorite. Do you have a sense of well-being? Do you feel like people care about you? and what you do and how you do it. So we take a look at what does it mean to be engaged at work. This was a study from the CARE principle, where we took a look at what really drives employee engagement. And by the way, an international study across cultures in South America, North America, East and Western Europe, Africa, and Asia. And what was fascinating is that these were the top 3 in every culture, which lets you know, right, that people are people. And while that was interesting, we really wanted to find out what were the drivers of the drivers. So the number one driver of pride in the organization was we kept our promises, right? We set goals. If we said we were going to do it, we did it. We kept our promises. Trust was all about communication, right? Are we transparent? Are we open and honest with our people? And then, delightfully so, the number one driver of the number one driver was recognition, appreciation. I did something, somebody noticed it, and it was celebrated, right? I love that, and I think one of the things that Rideau Recognition does really well, right, in connecting people and giving them the tools to say thank you, to show their appreciation, and then the data on the back end, which helps you then grow and develop in your culture. Well, I love that engagement, roadmap. I also love the fact that it spurs growth. You have an engaged culture or a disengaged culture. When you have an engaged culture, plus 19% in growth, disengaged minus 30. Now, I don't have my PhD in stats. Even I know plus 19 good, minus 30 bad, right? So let's move on to enablement. Actually, before I do that, Tommy Lee, any thoughts on our little roadmap there of employee engagement? Does that ring true with you?
Oh, absolutely. You hit it right on the mark. Those are definitely, the drivers of the culture. A lot of times people don't understand what you mean by culture, and this definitely describes it, of what, the culture that we're all seeking, whether it's your family or personal or professional. So totally with you.
Perfect. Well, let's move on now to enabled. And I love this story from Disney, and a lot of people around the world are Disney fans, whether it's the movies or the parks or whatever. This was published in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago, and talks about a family that had saved up to go to Disney. As you know, not an inexpensive proposition, right? So they'd saved up their money. They'd headed down to Orlando to go to Disney World. Now the dynamic of their family is a little different. They have one of their sons is autistic. And for those of you that have any experience with autism, depending where you are on the spectrum, right? Loud noises, bright lights, big crowds can be unsettling, which was the case for their son. They had never been able to stay all day at Disney because of that. So anyway, they got there bright and early. They're going down Main Street, they're excited to be at Disney, when their autistic son said, "Hey, Mom, can I get a purple Mickey balloon?" And she goes, "Great." She was about to get it for him when she said, "You know what? I'll tell you what, if you can make it through the whole day, if you can make it all the way to the fireworks, I'll get you your purple balloon. Do we have a deal?" And he goes, "Deal." She said the best bargain she ever struck, right? He was focused all day. Crowds didn't bother him. The noise didn't bother him. They got all the way to the fireworks. Well, as they're heading back to their hotel, her son reminds her, "Mom, purple balloon." She goes, "Oh, not a problem." Goes to the first kiosk. Lots of balloons, no purple. Second kiosk, lots of balloons, no purple balloons. Third kiosk, lots of balloons, no purple. And as you know, you can't substitute. It's purple. Red, blue, pink, not going to do. Well, she starts to panic. And one of the employees at Disney, and they're not employees, they're called, cast members. They come to perform, not to work. Notices that she's upset and comes over and says, "Excuse me, ma'am, can I help?" Well, she starts to tell him the story, and she breaks down and cries. And he says, "You know what? Don't worry. I got this." And he goes to the back, and he blows up a purple balloon, and he comes back to give it to her. Now, Tommy Lee, here's your skill testing question. How much do you think he charged her for that balloon?
I would hope nothing.
No, he charged her 3 times as much. She had to have it. That's the one time you could charge above. No, right. You're exactly right. He didn't charge her a penny. He gave her the balloon as a gift and created a forever memory. And doesn't that embody Disney, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you think they told their friends?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In fact, he got written up in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, how great is that, right?
Yep. Such a little thing and such a big impact.
Exactly. Somebody that was aware, that was enabled. Now, do you think that employee had to say, by the way, when you do the inventory, there's one purple balloon missing? Or, I didn't charge him for it, so we're going to be short. No, they're empowered, they're enabled to create those forever experiences. And that's exactly what they did. So, as you're looking at this, reflect on your team. Have you given them the training? Do they know what they can do and what they can't do, right? To create those forever memories, to create that engagement, not only engagement, what does it mean to be energized? My favorite topic, that emotional connection to work. WestJet is one of my favorite case studies. Now, a lot of you might not be familiar with this particular airline. It's a Canadian airline. It's kind of the Southwest Airlines of Canada, except they're just a little nicer because, as you know, Canadians are just a little nicer than everybody else. I say that as a proud Canadian, born in Edmonton, raised in Vancouver. Well, WestJet has this kind of tradition. Every year they do something just kind of wacky and really fun for their customers. So I'm going to play a video for you. We shortened it up with their permission. And I want you to look at the faces of not only the passengers that they pull off this incredible feat for, take a look at the faces of the WestJetters, which is what they call their employees. And then we'll talk about it.
'Twas a night before Christmas, and all across the land, the good folks of WestJet had a miracle planned. On the eve before flying, the guests were in their beds. Visions of traveling danced in their heads. While out on the runway, something seemed to arrive. It was left in the lounge. 'Twas a Christmas surprise. Oh, hello there! Is that Cohen? What are you looking for Christmas this year, Cohen? A choo-choo train? Oh, what would Mommy and Daddy like for Christmas?
Big TV. What I need is new socks and underwear.
An Android tablet.
Santa boots.
While the guests told their Christmas wishes to good old St. Nick, WestJetters took note of the shop home. It was a great rush. New flights in the air, and all those presents, but a moment of despair. But was everything ready? We all had to wait for the moment of truth. Carousel away.
Merry Christmas!
The guests never expected what they'd asked of St. Nick would actually appear. It was all quite a treat. A WestJetter would say it was more than mere fun. Miracles do happen when we all work as one. We'll give Santa the last word on this most special night.
Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good flight. Ho, ho, ho.
Is that like the greatest video of all time, Tommy Lee?
I love it. I can't even
So-
tell you how much that lifted my spirits.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I'm glad. So,
And I've never heard of West. I'll be seeking out WestJet. Because makes sense. I want to provide them with business so they can continue to do that for people.
absolutely. So, what was the reaction of the passengers?
I'm in total disbelief. Who does that?
I know, like you and I travel quite a bit, and when people are at the carousel and they're crying, it's not usually because something good happened, right? Most airlines, I think their motto is "We're not happy until you're not happy."
Right. I mean, what a great, and again, such a small investment, because I'm sure it was no skin off WestJet's, balance sheet to do that. But, you know, they're going to get the number one, it tells me something about the culture of this company.
Right.
It tells me a great deal about what kind of company this is.
Yeah, see, it's really interesting. So they never made commercials out of that. They just put it on YouTube. Do you know it had over 44 million views?
Wow.
So here's your skill testing question again. How many Canadians are there?
How many Canadians what?
How many Canadians are there? How many people you think live in Canada?
Oh, I don't know. 12 million.
Okay, it's a little bigger than that. Anyway, it's about 33, 34 million. My point is...
I was going to say 40, but that just sounded way too high. Okay.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So 33, 34 million Canadians, right?
Okay.
44 million views. Every Canadian knows that story. I mean, you can't buy that kind of advertising.
No.
And it's really interesting. You know, if you want to have fun, go on YouTube and go to the WestJet Christmas Miracle outtakes. You know the guy who says, "I want new socks and underwear"?
Mm-hmm. Santa
literally says to him, "Ho, ho, ho. Are you sure you don't want a big screen TV?" Everybody's getting over. He goes, "Don't socks and underwear. What the heck was I thinking?" You know?
Right. Because he's just in daddy or husband mode, you know?
Right.
That's what we do.
Yeah. So what's really interesting to me is that a kind of culture you think that attracts great talent? Of course it does. You think it retains great talent? Of course it does. Are they energized? I mean, you see people, they're running to buy this stuff. You know, it's really interesting. Toronto Globe and Mail, Canada's largest newspaper, did a study, said it's harder to get a job as a baggage handler at WestJet than it is to get into the Harvard School of Business.
Wow.
So great cultures attract good people, and they keep good, and they repulse the wrong kind of people.
Right.
Well, here's the great data, you know, back to the data, is, you know, companies with low engagement, about 10% operating income, high engagement, 14.3. That's a big jump. You add enablement, empowerment, whatever you want to call it, and, you know, energy, it doubles productivity. So is it a nice thing to do? Absolutely not. Will it make your mama proud? You bet. Is it good business? The best business you could ever hope for. Well, I want to give you some practical things as we kind of wrap up here. We had a great interview with a guy named Carlos Aguilera. That's him in the yellow shirt there. Every measure, he's top of the charts. High engagement, low turnover, high customer satisfaction. And I asked Carlos, I said, what are some of the things you do with your people? And in fact, give me your best practice. And he said, that's easy, 10 pennies. He said, you know, I grew up with leaders that were very quick to point out what I did wrong, very slow to point out what I did right. And I didn't want to be one of those managers. So to remember there's lots of good things going on, I put 10 pennies in my left pocket every day. And I set a goal to have 10 positive interactions with my people every day. Now, 10 is a lot. You know, where's he got to be? He's got to be with his people, or he's got to be texting them, or group emails, or writing them little thank you notes and so on, to make sure that he's connected every day. Well, he got phenomenal results with that, and so much so that Avis decided to do a North American tour. So they had buses and T-shirts and barbecues and donuts, and the message was to the employees that you are appreciated. Whether you're a utility technician, a mechanic, checking people in, washing the cars, driving the cars, you are appreciated. And I love that banner. I thought it was hilarious that it was underneath barbed wire. You know, like, we love you, you can't leave. We love you, but you can't leave, right? Anyway, the message was very clear, that the customer experience will never exceed the employee experience. You know, before the doors open, before, you know, you open up your website and people start to interact, how do they feel about your products and services? Because if they're not excited, if they're not all in, there's no way they'll get your customers engaged. And that, you know, is really the key, right? You start with the employees and it flows to the customers. Well, you know, in the annual report the year after they did that, 32% increase. Now, granted, they did a lot of things. I thought it was significant that they cited that campaign specifically in their annual report as to one of the major reasons why they had such a big year. Well, what's the ratio of positive and negative in the workplace? Tommy Lee, another question for you. What do you think the ratio should be? Is it 1-to-1, one compliment to every criticism, 2 compliments to every criticism, 3 compliments to every criticism, or 5? Just intuitively, which one would you go with here? Tell me.
I'm going to go with D. I'm going to go with D.
5-to-1. And it's interesting, and you know this from your work, is a negative comment is so much more impactful. I mean, it hits you so much more emotionally. Mm-hmm. It takes at least 5. Now, on Amazon, it's even more than that to negate a 1-star review. I have friends that work in Amazon. They can say it can be up to 20 5-star reviews to negate that 1-star review. That's the power of negativity, and why we've got it. Now, do you think this works in your personal life, Tommy Lee?
Oh, absolutely. Especially wives and children. Yeah.
You bet. See, Harvard School of Business says it's 5.6. I'll tell you what's interesting. University of Washington did a study with newlyweds. You're going to love this. Put them in a room for 15 minutes and said, do a puzzle together. And they recorded the positive to negative ratio. Here's what they found. If your ratio was about 1 to 1, 0.77, rounded up to 1, they could predict with 94% accuracy, within 3 years, you'd be divorced.
Wow.
If it was at least 5 to 1, you were still married. So what's your takeaway? Don't be doing puzzles with your spouse. I'm really sure it could end your marriage prematurely. The challenge, though, is, 10 pennies. What is your ratio at work? What is your ratio at home? Because, your positive culture, it drives good feelings. It also drives growth. Look at this, Cotter and Haskett, an 11-year study, positive cultures. Look at that revenue growth and stock appreciation. Ridiculous numbers, right? Coming back to how do people feel about their role with you as a leader and their role in the organization. Phenomenal. Well, the soft stuff is the hard stuff, right? I always say that our moms were our first managers, right? And what did your mom teach you, Tommy? Remember to say,
please, thank you.
Right. Clean up after yourself. Don't push, don't hit, don't bite. Good advice. And there's my mom and dad, John Dalton.
Nice.
And my mom loves that I show that. My dad was my first manager, my biggest cheerleader. My mom taught me to work hard and to be kind.
I'm loving the coordination. I love the coordination, the gray. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
I see where you get your fashion sense from. Yes.
No question.
Love
well, one of the things our parents taught us is that you write thank you notes, right? You get that sweater from your Aunt Mabel at Christmas, whether you liked it or not, you wrote a thank you note. Right. And I think it's a great practice for leaders, and you don't just say, hey, thank you, great job, Bob. You tell them what they did right. You're specific. Well, how did it tie into the values or goals of the organization? How did it impact the customer or growth of the company? And sincere appreciation. It takes you 2 or 3 minutes. I challenge you to write 3 notes a week for 3 weeks. You'll be shocked at the impact that it has. It just shows up in the nick of time and makes people feel good about their role on your team. And the reason I think it's so impactful is nobody does it anymore. Right? Everybody, it's easy to text and tweet, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm saying, you know what, take the time to write a thank you note, and people will appreciate it. They'll put it in their journals. They'll put it in their, they'll frame it. They'll put it up in their workspace. I want to show you this just really quick. I got this wonderful little thank you note. I did a conference for Bob Evans, the great restaurants, the comfort food. And I'll tell you, the note was so touching. It meant so much to me. I put it in my journal. I keep a travel journal, and I record it for my kids and my posterity. Not that they'll ever read it. I do it anyway. So the impact of a simple note. Have you ever received a thank you note, Tommy Lee, that you kept?
Oh, absolutely. And I make my kids write them,
You go.
Because no one does do them anymore. You're absolutely right. So you get an actual note in the mail, and the email is great, but I'm just saying, when you actually take the time and handwrite something, it's something very special, especially today, because you just don't see them often. And, having a sense of gratitude is something that we're always trying to teach our children. So yeah, my kids write thank you notes. I write thank you notes. My wife definitely writes thank you notes. So.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. I'll tell you, you said it earlier, the little things make a big difference.
Yeah.
And you may think that writing a thank you note is a little thing. Trust me, it'll be a big deal to whoever receives it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the roadmap. We talked about engaged, enable, and energize. Hopefully there were 2 or 3 things you could take away, whether it's 10 pennies or writing thank you notes, or what am I doing to really engage, enable, and energize my people. My favorite data point of all time is if you're happy and engaged at work, you're 150% more likely to be happy in your life overall. And we know that. When we've all had jobs that we hated, and that, negatively, it bled over into our families. There's no question it did. And the opposite is also true, that when I'm happy and engaged at work, I come home happy and engaged. I think as leaders, we owe it to ourselves and our people to send our people home happy. And never forget this, take it home. We talked about it at the beginning. This is why I work. My beautiful wife, Heidi, my 4 exceptional children, right? That's an old photo. This is kind of what we look like now.
Nice.
I know that doesn't look like a real baby, but it is. And my one son couldn't make it. That's that creepy head in the background.
Nice.
Kind of fun. And you know, I love showing you that picture of my mom and dad. My mom and dad were married for 65 years. And, you know, I'm 4 years old in this picture. My dad's teaching me how to skate in Edmonton, Alberta. And we always laugh that if you're 4 years old and you don't know how to skate in Edmonton, the neighbors talk, right? Well, my dad taught me a lot of life lessons. My favorite, and one that's impacted me probably more than any, is my dad talked to the parking lot attendant the same as captains of industry. To my dad, everybody was important. He had a saying, you know, Chess, be good to everybody. Everybody's having a tough day. And I think, you know, if you look at your people and you approach them as if they're going through something that's pretty tough, whether it's in their professional lives or their personal lives, I think 9 times out of 10, you'll be right. Because, you know, at work, you don't know what your folks just came from. You know, you don't know if they're having trouble with a child, if they've got some bad news, if they've got a sickly parent. What you do know is that the time they spend with you, that they can believe what they do matters, that they make a difference. And when they made a difference, you remembered to say thank you. You noticed it. You celebrated it. And I think we can all do that. Well, feel free to connect with me at thecultureworks.com. We got all kinds of free stuff and surveys and online stuff that you can take. We'd love to connect with you and help you build the culture that you want and that your people deserve. Well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Reverend. So can I get an amen, Tommy Lee?
Amen. High five. Can you give me a high five, Chester?
There
we go. We got a lot of questions, so I'm gonna forward these to you, Chester. I want to hit on just a couple right now, but yeah, just a big response to your presentation. So thank you. We have John, who says, "A culture of belief? ? Ours is a culture of disbelief. What are some baby steps we can take to get there?"
Great question, John. You know, your culture, your organization has a culture that may or may not be what you want. Your team also has a culture. So I would encourage you to get together as a team and say, what are the things that are important to us and to each other? And let's take that baby step by saying, you know, overall, this may not be the culture we want. Let's create the culture on our team that we adore. And maybe it's being more transparent. Maybe it's being more innovative. Maybe it's being more grateful for each other. Let's talk about little things. Maybe we can start writing thank you notes. Maybe we can start doing things at lunch together, some one-on-one time. You know, there's a whole cadre of things, a whole myriad of things that you can do as a team to create a culture where you feel good about coming to work with your team. So hopefully there's a couple of tips in there for you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think most of us look at the organization, there's no way I can change this organization. But, you know, you kind of start within. Start with yourself, start with your team, like you said. You know, that's where you can get the most impact or the most change. And stuff like that is contagious, you know? It really is.
It'll ripple through the organization. People will want to work on your team.
Absolutely.
Got great talent.
And then I have another question from, well, more of a comment from Melinda. I love Mr. Elton. I love your rock star reference. I've had mentors that were rock stars, and I felt like I was one too. He was the lead singer, we were the band, and we made beautiful music together. I've also had bosses that hogged the limelight, and there was no music at all.
Yeah, no, I love that comment. You know, it's really interesting. I think the best leaders, if you think back about the leaders that you were most engaged with, that you would, you know, walk on hot coals, you would, you know, charge through brick walls, I guarantee you they cared about you. And the way they cared about you is they appreciated your work, they knew you as a person, and they didn't hog the limelight. They gave you credit where credit is due. I think that's the hallmark of any great leader, is that they do appreciate all the little things that happen every day. Mm-hmm. And they're not afraid to call it out. You know, I think new leaders in particular, they feel like if they give too much recognition and too much credit, somehow they're diminished. You know, that should have been I'm the leader. I should, you know, my ideas are the best and so on. I think the longer you become a leader, the more you appreciate the fact that it's not about you. In fact, right. It's about your team. So there's a maturity process that goes through there. And I love that analogy of when you have a great leader, everybody hears the music.
Yeah.
not. There's no music at all.
I thought it was great. And even she used the word, I've had mentors and then that did make music, and I've had bosses that didn't. So
Yeah,
her
the difference
choice, her
between a
choice
mentor and a boss. Yeah.
words. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. She probably did it unconsciously, you know, but when she's thinking about those past experiences, she's thinking of a mentor versus a boss. Just one more I want to add in here, just right quick. Maisie says, why orange, why carrots? I thought that would be a good one to end.
Yeah, you know, we were looking for a metaphor when we first started to write. In fact, like our first 6 books all had carrot in the title, right? It was, you know, managing with carrots, the 24 carrot manager, a carrot a day, the carrot principle, and so on. And, you know, carrots are orange. And so it kind of became our color. It's a wonderful color, by the way. It's not only the color of carrots, it's the color of optimism, which I love. It's the color of safety. It's the color of healing. You know, it's the color of collaboration, right? It's not a primary color. You've got to put yellow and red together to make orange. It's the color of change. You know, it's the last color that disappears at depth. A lot of diving watches have orange faces.
Okay.
I just love all of that goodness that orange brings. And I just think it's a happy color. You know, often people will say, okay, so your socks match your shirt. They match your, I've got an orange faced watch. What's the deal, right? It's my brand. And I will tell you a funny story. I started to wear orange socks. So I go to church one Sunday, and I've got a friend, 7 little girls. And he said, my girls love your orange socks. And said, this week you didn't wear orange socks. And they were really disappointed. And at that moment, I knew I was in forever, Tommy Lee. I could never not wear orange socks. So literally, my sock drawer, they're all orange. And it's a happy color, and it's a great color. So thanks for asking. You want to cheer yourself up, wear a little orange. Trust me.
Yeah, I can't think of orange without thinking of you. So, yeah.
That's great.
So, well, thank you so much, Chester. I always just love being with you, even virtually, you know.
There you go.
And I just really thank you. You gave me a whole lot to think about. You know, I have a lot of takeaways myself. So I appreciate it. I really do. And if you want to connect with Chester, be sure to visit thecultureworks.com. Everything about him and his partners and his books are there for the taking. And if you have any other questions, just press your button and I'll get them to Chester and we will have them on the Rideau website.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot.
You bet. Thanks, Tommy Lee. Always good to be with you too. Take care and safe travels. You bet.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.